All right, and there's some new people on this who haven't been on before. If you haven't been on before, we call these sessions No Off Season. We're Slate. We're a startup that helps teams create on-brand stories content in real time. We have Tyler Steinhardt on here. He's the director of marketing for the Premiere Lacrosse League, and he's going to tell us a bit about himself, his career, his background, and answer kind of any questions that come in. So if you do have questions, type them into the chat and we'll call on you to unmute yourself, actually introduce yourself to Tyler and personally ask your question. So you can type out your question, but we'll also call on you to kind of make this interactive and feel free to jump in at any time with questions throughout. We're not going to kind of segment my questions versus your questions. So please feel the liberty to ask as many questions as you want throughout this thing, and we'll keep it going and keep everyone involved. We'll try to cut this at 6:45 Eastern, just to be conscious of everyone's time. And try to kind of keep to that timeline. So with that, we'll probably just get started here and kick it off to Tyler to introduce yourself and I guess tell us to start a little bit about your career path and what led you to the PLL.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Tyler Steinhardt, Director of Marketing at PLL. Beforehand, I ran sort of our social side. So I oversee pretty much all of our social and media marketing for the league. We're a single entity league, so we own the teams too. So we were founded October 2018. So we sort of oversee what's going on in the league channels and player channels and team channels at the same time. Beforehand, for my career path, I worked at a group called Whistle Sports, which owned the Lacrosse network at the time, and sort of managed TLN about a year and a half, 2 years in New York City. And before that, I ran a nonprofit that worked with wounded American veterans called Shootout for Soldiers, where we did these 24-hour lacrosse events benefiting wounded vets. That's actually how I met Paul Rabel, who's the CMO and co-founder here at the PLL, how I got my really first start in lacrosse in the industry at large, and sort of did that for about 8-9 years, and it still goes on, but sort of from the background. It's a little bit like my career path, a bunch of little odd jobs and little like events and things like that on the side. It sort of led to things. I was telling a story about some hats I built when I was in college too, and things like that led to me understanding how to use social or merch, et cetera, that led to where I am now.
Yeah. Could you tell that hat story just to kick things off?
Yeah. So before we're talking about merch, because I was wearing the NBC hat, and when the election was going on in 2016, I was living in DC at the time, and there was this like speech going on. Rudy Giuliani was wearing a hat that said "Make Mexico Great Again" also. And it was just such a ridiculous hat because it had so many words on there that it was like crammed across the front. And I saw the hat and I thought that was like immediately very funny. So I bought the domain name on GoDaddy. I ordered like 500 hats from friends, from like a friend of mine who like produced merch, and then went to try to go sell them in DC, and it just totally flopped because it was like just really bizarre, or like offensive, and so no one had any use for it or rights towards it. And so they're sitting in my parents' basement right now, along with like a few other like really bad ideas and campaigns I've tried to launch over the years. So that was how I burnt a couple grand in baking hats off of a Giuliani hat.
A good lesson. Do you tell that did you tell that in your PLL job interview?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's like the biggest failure I've ever had. It's definitely not how to run a business.
And did you play lacrosse growing up, or where did your interest in the sport start? Because you've definitely been involved in lacrosse well before the PLL.
Yeah, so I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. So I played lacrosse, which was a hotbed down there since I was 4 or 5 years old. It's always been part of my life. One of the things for me in terms of like finding a connection into like how to get involved is, I would say around like, I don't know, when I was 15 or 16, I wasn't that great about it. So I started writing about it and covering it. And so I wrote for like a local paper, just going to high school games and covering it and spending my summers doing that. And I ended up winding my way into like coaching in Uganda actually for quite a bit, and coached the Uganda national lacrosse team. So I've always sort of had this connection to the sport of lacrosse. And that sort of led me to where I am now, because I've been obsessed with the sport. So I've gotten to meet a lot of people into it and help kind of grow the industry at large.
Yeah. Yeah, so it seems like a dream job at the perfect time with the league kind of just getting off the ground here. And would love to hear, a lot of people here work in sports and have worked in sports, are interested in working in sports. Not many people get to see a league kind of start up from scratch. Could you tell us a little bit about what it was like at the beginning, and and then, which wasn't too long ago, and how you went about kind of creating a voice and an identity for the league on digital and social and across channels.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of creating a voice identity on social is almost like secondary to building a logo first, right? So we had we had built a logo, and then we built 6 teams. How we started with, so we built 6 team logos, and then we built 6 team identities. So what are sort of like these slogans that kind of do it? For context, if you're not familiar with the Premiere Lacrosse League, basically Paul Rabel, who's sort of the LeBron of lacrosse, founded it, and there was existing pro lacrosse league called Major League Lacrosse that been around for about 2 decades now. Player wages are completely sort of stifled. There's sort of like a cap that's very low. There wasn't offering healthcare benefits, and there was no TV exposure, so media is pretty limited. And so Paul decided, hey, we're going to kind of build out a new professional lacrosse league. We're going to raise capital. They worked with the Rain Group and CAA and a few other folks, and did a tour-based model. And the tour-based model allows you to sort of like save capital costs of having facilities and all the sort of like costs associated with having like different regional markets into it. You have kind of like economies of scale behind the scenes, especially in the media front. And so why I bring that up is because when you're a tour-based model, you're building 6 new entities. You don't have a Baltimore team or a New York team or a Boston team. And so you can't really build into the identity of the city all of a sudden. You have to really be thoughtful of like what the identity of the team is. Yeah. And that was something that like we started. And so our first 6 team names were Atlas, Archers, Chaos, Chrome, Whip Snakes, and Redwoods. And we called them lacrosse clubs, kind of building off what we've seen in European soccer. We wanted to embrace the club element of it. And they're a little bit off the beaten path, right? Chaos or Redwoods or a Whip Snake. What is that? And they're a little different. And our thought process was to try to find things that weren't already in lexicon, right? Like how many teams can be named the Lions or the Bears or like things like that are like used across there. So we try to find different imagery and naming towards it. And then from there, we sort of built out the team identities. And then we had 160 players come over from the old league with the best players in the world. So the most important thing that we accentuated early on in the PLL branding is that this is the best players in the world. They're touring the country in 15 stops. They're coming to your backyard instead of only being in around 6 cities they were in the previous league. And we're going to play national television. And making sure that we put the best of the sport first was the biggest thing that we sort of put forward. And then sort of the team identities from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and how do you try, besides the names of the teams, how do you try to differentiate the identity? Because you basically kind of control, it's not like there's obviously local teams and local marketing teams for the Redwoods or for Chaos. That's all from a central kind of league perspective, but you try to create a different look, a different voice for each team. How do you go about trying to create those identities without necessarily a history or a city? And then how do you try to get fans to choose, or do you try to get fans to choose?
No, it's a great question. So like our general thesis in building PLL, and when I say our thesis, really Paul and Mike are the really the brains behind it, is that there's an age of the fluid fan, and that the fluid fan really means the fans attached to players more than anything. So they're a fan of LeBron when he's in Cleveland, when he's in Miami, then when he's in LA, and they're LeBron fans. And so they'll buy that team's merch or they'll follow that team's highlights, whatever it might be. And they sort of go back and forth. And so first and foremost, our teams, the identities of the teams are built around the players themselves. So I'm actually in our office right now. We're in the chaos room, as we call it. That's why it's kind of like chaos crazy. You can see it's a scorpion behind here. And so Chaos's style offensively was run and gun, fast paced, high scoring, flashy, and they talked a lot of crap on field. And we embraced that for that team. Whereas other teams are much more like kind of like hit singles and play it safe. And so like we let the players sort of dictate the identity of the team. And then the second part of it too is we built the teams. And one of the really hard things from a league standpoint is having competitive balance in year one, which we did a really nice job of. We had, I think, 60% of our games were 1-goal games, for example, 9 overtime games of the 38 that happened last year. So it's kind of crazy. But I bring that up because we actually built the teams with college affiliations early on. So there was Whip Snakes have, I think, 18 players who went to Maryland. The Redwoods had 9 players that went to Notre Dame. Chrome has 7 players who went to Duke. And so that helped build like early identity that acted as a bridge that if you're a college lacrosse fan trying to figure out who to root for in the pro league, it was an easier transition for you to find a team because college lacrosse for so long has been the top of the sport to sort of like find out a pro team. And so between sort of the player identities and the college connection, and then also some people just love the logos and colors. That's sort of how we built that like team affinity from fans.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, how does it work with players between teams? Are they locked into their team a little more so than other sports and like have ownership in that team? Or do you see are players going to be switching teams?
They can switch, and we have like rules and trades and free agency periods, things like that. So it's like any other sports league.
Got it.
I think it's interesting because the players have much more ownership in building out the identity of the team as well. And
Yeah.
so I think that it's much more akin to maybe like where Joe Namath or Bart Starr, these early NFL players were, and that they're like kind of connected to the history of that team. And our hope is that in 20 years, you associate Paul Rabel with Atlas Lacrosse Club into that. From a league standpoint, one of the really innovative things that we did is that we gave players equity in the league as well, which is a first in team sports, and I think in sports at large, as far as I'm concerned. And so the players are in stride with us in what we're doing. And so the reason we actually use a company like Slate or we use Greenfly, for example, is because we're so player focused that our players are incentivized really to drive forward our media. It's not like it's a lift for them to create content or promote their games, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so we work hand in hand with them on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And can you elaborate a little on that, on how kind of, obviously the players are bought in on the idea literally because they have kind of that ownership stake. But what's kind of worked well and working with them that, it's still kind of getting the most out of their personal brands, but also collaborating on kind of the bigger scale of what the league needs. And there's partners involved as well.
Yeah, I think that for us, the most important thing is that we gave as much content and opportunity to the players for them to create their own brand. And so when we started building out PLL, we launched in October 22nd, 2018. We announced the league, and our first game was July 1st. And we legally could not work with players until actually March 1st of 2019. So we had about 3 months after the contracts were up to sort of work with them and sort of like plan for the season. And so we spent a lot of that time talking to them, asking them questions around what would you want for your Instagram feed? What are you looking for Twitter? How can we get you to engage more Instagram stories? And we took sort of those learnings, and a lot of it was, hey, we just want more access to the content and coverage that's happening. And so we created like an automatic API from Photo Shelter to Greenfly to our players' phones and how it was easy for them to search it. And what we found is just giving the access to the players to be able to create content was the most important thing, not telling them what to do or how to do it, being so specific.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about, obviously before you had a season to plan for and everything that kind of hit was in your off season. And I know for a lot of sports leagues and teams, they've really been relying on a ton of historical content to kind of fill the time. You had 1 year of history to work off of, but it still seems like your content strategy hasn't really kind of missed a beat in the last few months. Tell us a bit about how you're approaching kind of this current moment and what your approach has been the past few months with content across social.
Man, it's a tough one. I think like our initial thought early on, I think first people didn't know how long quarantine would last, right? So I think early on, like a lot of folks, we sort of like reacted by offering free access to our OTT platform to rewatch games, or putting games on Facebook, or trying to sort of like do different programming that was sort of so immediate that happened the first week or two. And then we started shifting into what I would say are like 1 week sprints of coverage, where we would do things for 3 to 4 days that were like hyper engaging for our audience. An example of that, we did a really nice partnership with Utz. They came in, they were working the league, and they had a product of cheese balls. And instead of just sort of like having our players take pictures with cheese balls, we did a cheese ball toss contest where the players had to toss how many cheese balls up over their head in 60 seconds or 52 seconds our shot clock, see how many they can get in that time frame. And it was a really fun way of integrating the brand, creating new content, of creating new drama and storylines into it and tying things back into it. And we sort of had that go on Instagram Live like a Friday night. And so that was like one of the early things that we did, was just sort of try to create like mini tentpole events that we can run remotely that created fresh content, because we can rehash and do the best plays and best whatever of this and that from last year. But you're right that we only have 1 year of history. And B, fans are looking for something new. I think we started that the conversation today on the Last Dance and the match, is that it's just something fresh and new. And that was really important for us to deliver early on, was just new content on a very high frequent basis to our fans.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great time to, I guess, experiment with that stuff. And with the access to the players, that's really what fans want to see, right? Like what the players are doing during this time. And it seems like you've been able to source a lot of that content from them and encourage them to be pretty active on social during this time, which I'm 100%. Sure helped. before we kind of get to another question about a recent campaign, I'm curious, and thought just kind of came to me as you were talking about the content you did when kind of quarantine started. As you look at what you did last year as your first season, is there anything you did last year that you're like, that worked so well, we're definitely going to do that again, in future seasons? And is there anything on the other side where you tried something and you're like, you know what, we're not gonna do that again? Since it was your first season, I'm sure you threw a lot of ideas kind of against the wall, whether it was content or, something a little more unique.
Yeah, we tried to create a mini documentary every single week for the first few weeks of the season, and it worked to start. And we had maybe 5 or 6 episodes, and then I think we exhausted our production team, and they were like, "What the hell are we doing here?"
Right.
It was so quick, and it was such a constant flip, and it was also like you're trying to encapsulate how we work. So we come into a city, we have practices usually on a Friday night. There's a game or 2 games Saturday and then 1 game Sunday. Last year we had 6 teams, and then this past January we expanded to a 7th team. It was a really heavy footprint week over week. I think like stuff that we had a lot of success with that we didn't really do until the end of the year was a lot more around stats and around probability. We just opened up sports betting. We announced 2 weeks ago, and that was not something we had in our docket last year, but we had like some bracket challenges or other stat oriented stuff. And, we underestimated the fan interest in comparing stats and probability of team making playoffs and the score differential in the league. And that was stuff that we have basically built out new. We've got an @PLL stats. You can look up on Instagram or Twitter, and built like separate accounts and sort of vertical content as well.
Cool. That's good stuff. Tell us a bit more about, you recently did this virtual senior day campaign last week that we definitely loved and saw a lot of, at least here at Slate. Can you describe a little bit about what that campaign was and how it kind of came to be? Because it's almost one of those ones where I saw it that seems so kind of obvious and perfect for right now. And we'd just love to hear more about that and kind of the success you saw from it.
Yeah, it came from like a late night conversation with a friend. We were discussing, lunch was discussing like what would be the worst time for this, coronavirus to happen in our lives and like what would have impacted. And one of the things that came out very innocently was like, man, it would suck if this had ruined high school graduation. And working backwards, it was like, man, it would suck if it ruined your senior day, right? You had this like special moment where your parents come up and they recognize you. If you played a sport when you were younger, you sort of like have like a picture or your framed jersey or like flowers, and you get to have this like this closure to your career as a high school athlete. And I think that that's really what the pandemic robbed a lot of people love, is a closure on a lot of things in our lives. But getting back to it, we had this conversation. We're like, hey, how do we come in and sort of like be a sort of a force for good and create sort of positive content? To think like, if you look at John Krasinski's Some Good News, I think you look at a lot of humor out there. And in today's sort of environment, humor and feel good content is really what's thriving the best, because there's just always such bad news going on. And so we were trying to come up with a way that we can sort of work with it. And we came up with this concept of having our players congratulate and wish the seniors of their high school they went to like a happy senior day and a great career, et cetera. And so the actual logistics of it is we contacted 25 players, coaches. We got information on all their seniors, built out a giant list for every single guy, and recorded content with the players and sort of cut it up into videos that they each posted last Wednesday. And so it was really a touching tribute, I think, towards the players and their careers. And it was a nice way for us to sort of give back to the community and recognize that, look, it's not the end of the world not having a senior day if you're 18 years old. But, it is nice to kind of hear from an idol of yours who went to your school. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Looks like Michael Horton, Slate co-founder, has a question here. Michael, do you want to unmute and ask that one?
Hey, so Tyler, I heard Paul talking on a podcast, I think, a couple weeks ago about sort of just your strategy overall as a league and how, like baseball was built on the back of radio and football was built on the back of TV, and how, you guys are really building your whole league on the back of social media. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what advantages that would give you as somebody that's in charge of marketing and digital, that your league has that over, has that built into their their core, that's their focus. And also maybe like what sort of strategies you guys have, at least ones that you're willing to talk about, that you may think differentiate you from someone like the NFL or the MLB, since you're so focused on social and digital.
Yeah, I think the larger thoughts, it's a really a question, something Paul talks about too, that we talk about internally a bunch, is if you look at the historical trend of sports, right, that baseball became so big on the radio in the 1920s, people would sit around and listen to games, and then basketball rose with TV, especially the NFL, and then I would say more recently, UFC and WWE really took advantage of the web and streaming. Look at like the WWE as this massive multi-billion-dollar sort of like OTT platform. And part of it is that when you're new and you're small, you have less access to sort of like the larger array of things, of having like TV promotion and being covered on ESPN. And lacrosse is not talked about on SportsCenter every day. And so all we have is the tools at our disposal, which is social media. And so that's the reason that sometimes we move differently across the platform. I would say if you look at the illustrators on the NBA or NFL right now, they're at a whole different level. I mean, the creative, especially coming out of the NFL of late, is unreal. And we can't touch that because we don't have the budgets or the resourcing or teams. We know that. But we can do things that other teams can't, right? We can respond to 200 DMs a day. We can crowdsource fan interaction of saying, what jersey do you want to see this week? We can ask fans to sort of like tweet a picture of their TV when they're watching a game and engage differently. And so we sort of thought about it as like, hey, what is like our ability that's an area of arbitrage other people aren't doing that we can take advantage of? One example, we talked about the match earlier on, maybe before the start of this call, we talked about the match in golf, and they're mic'd up. And for PLL broadcasts, we've never seen one on TV. We actually mic up our players in game. We ask them questions while they're on the field. So if Paul Abel scores a goal, we'll then have Ryan Boyle, the announcer at NBC, be like, hey, Paul, what did you see on that dodge there that made you want to shoot the ball? And then he'll answer, and it's right there live on TV. And that's something that like no one else was doing. I mean, most recently the XFL was kind of testing some of that kind of stuff out, but we had to do it because it's all we had at our disposal to make a difference and get that edge and to get that attention. And so for social, I think like really we took it as like, what is our competitive advantage? We have a small community, which means we can activate them quicker, which means we can lean in quicker, we can get feedback loops happen on a much tighter basis. And so that's how we kind of see social, is that like it's our advantage because we're so native to it and because it's really what we have at our disposal.
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely shows that there's kind of that investment and buy-in from the top, and how nimble you could be with your social content, and how much you're kind of working with the audience in real time, which is a huge advantage from what leagues like the NFL or NBA would be comfortable with.
We for an additional sort of storyline to that, we crowdsourced the name of our 7th team. So we decided we were going to expand. We announced it maybe October of this year after the season ended. And we asked fans like, hey, we're going to expand. And then we ended up having like hundreds, not thousands of fan submissions go out throughout social, and like fans would comment what was best, some of our most engaged posts. And in the end, sort of the idea trickled up through a Barstool podcast called Part of My Take, if anyone's a fan there. They actually ended up naming it in the end, but we had hundreds of thousands of fan submissions that led to this name, the Water Dogs, as the team's called. So it's sort of a funny way of how we sort of engage and interact with our fans.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like, or it looks like Melissa has a question. Melissa, do you want to unmute and ask that one there?
Sure, thanks. I was just asking about the education of the casual fan. I know that obviously, there's so many pieces of lacrosse that are, I guess, very, very specific. And what are you guys doing to kind of help? Obviously, a lacrosse player knows everything that's going on, but someone who's maybe more of a casual fan, how are you helping them kind of learn, all the little pieces of the sport and educate them on, the rules, the plays, and what, is really going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that probably not enough in a lot of ways. When we have our broadcast come on TV, we have sort of graphics packages that sort of explain the rules and the tournament and the structure. And this year, especially, we're having a whole different tournament structure for what we're doing versus a typical season, to be fanless. And so I would say that we try to do our best, but we really don't have much content coming out in there. And it's actually, I just made notes myself that we talked about that a while ago, and I'll probably reconfigure it. We actually do think about this when it comes to TikTok, Melissa. So one of the advantages of TikTok, I'd argue, is that you're just showing your content to random people, right? So there's a For You page and a following page if you're on TikTok. And the For You page is just showing your content to, I'd say, 1,000 random folks. And so it gives us the opportunity and forces us actually to retell stories and make it really obvious to a new fan. And that's kind of the areas where we do that kind of stuff right now. Working on more content is almost trying to catch up a new fan into what they're still watching. But from educating a larger sport as a whole, probably not enough, to be frank with you. And it's a good point.
Looks like Jake has a question there. Jake, did you want to jump in and ask that one?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is more of a personal question. I'm a part of the men's lacrosse team in Oregon, and I run the social media account there, actually. And a problem that what we've had over the past couple of seasons is retain rate of our followers. So Tyler especially has talked about how like you kept fans interacted and everything, but this kind of goes for everybody across the board in sports. Like, how do you guys maintain the follower accounts and especially keep them up going through the off season and all that stuff and just pretty much all that?
First, you do a great job running the account. I think it's one of the better MCLA teams that's sort of run on the Oregon side. So kudos to you. I would say, like, in terms of like how we approach retaining followers, I think what we care about far more than the follower count right now on any platform is the engagement level. And that's what we look at the most. And so we look at our engagement rate on content far more than we look at our total follower counts. Like if you pull up us versus the MLS or us versus another league, we're going to be, absolutely dwarfing follower count. But if you compare it versus engagement, we have a much higher rate of engagement. So our thought process is that it's really important to find content that resonates with the audience. And so it's being timely yet sort of new. A good example of this is we announced sports betting 2 weeks ago. And to sort of like roll that out, we sort of integrated humor of The Last Dance, having Michael Jordan looking at the iPad and sort of caption it with like, when you can finally bet on sports. And so when everyone's talking about The Last Dance, or everyone's talking about the match, or whatever, we try to figure out a way to sort of make that cultural subject connected to PLL or lacrosse and to keep sort of like the conversation relevant. And so that's probably like the only sort of like hack I'd have is like, how do you deliver your message in like a more concurrent way? And that kind of keeps engagement up, which sort of like helps retain followers and grow them down the road too.
Okay. Yeah. Cause like, I don't know if you've seen our profile recently, but like I've been posting all the senior posts and we've just been losing followers after followers and followers. So like, obviously that entertainment factor and just keeping them engaged is obviously the best thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that the notion of losing followers isn't an awful thing. I honestly, like, I've become more comfortable with it, I guess, in some ways. The PLL is not losing followers. I'm not saying that in any way that like, hey, it's okay to lose followers. But there's some people who don't want to see your posts sometimes, and that's okay, right? Like you're aiming to post for different reasons. Sometimes we have to make brand posts to sort of like fund the league because we're a startup, and that's not the sexiest kind of content. But it's really important for us that we give back to the people who sort of invested in our league and grow that. And if you're going to unfollow and follow back later or sort of follow from afar because you couldn't look past one piece of content, then so be it. It's not worth sort of sweating about. But I think that the quality of the content and the importance of it's far more important than like losing a couple followers here and there. I think that's sort of like an overrated statistic, honestly, that we became obsessed with in early days of social. And it's far more important your engagement rate or views or how people are sharing your content or saving it. We really track DMs on Instagram, for example, and have like created our own sort of metrics for that. So that's sort of how we approach it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
And speaking to that a little bit further, do you, and maybe it's changed and evolves as the years go on, but do you feel like you're mainly trying to service your kind of core fan base? Do you mainly feel like you're trying to expand beyond that and get the casual fan interested in lacrosse, or is it some mix of the two? And is there tension there sometimes with like people who, love lacrosse, played lacrosse, watch every match, and then, maybe some of the content is too casual for them, or does that not really exist because they just love it?
You're spot on. It brings back to what Melissa asked earlier about educating new fans, is that if you create an explainer video of how the rules of lacrosse work or PLL, your core fan is like, why the hell are you posting this, right? Like this drama is going on and this thing in the Instagram comments, and they're so attached to what's going on the day to day that they're missing the forest for the trees of how we're trying to approach larger fans. I think our approach towards it is that when we see a ton of engagement on a certain type of topic, we create a verticalized account towards it. That feeds content specifically for that. So for example, as we have an @PLL bets account, we have an @PLL stats account, we have an @PLL highlights account, and there is probably a 1% of our audience that are like rabid fans that follow everything and can go account to account to us and can tell you every little nuance around PLL more than I could. And we want to service them, but from our main channels, we're more conscious of like how we sort of integrate there. And so when it gets to a point where like, hey, this can sort of stand on its own, we do it. And so I would say there's 4 social media folks on the PLL team, and we manage about 42, 43 different social accounts right now between us. Across 7 teams, the league, 3 podcasts. And so we handle all that kind of stuff. And so we sort of create separate sort of like verticalized entities to sort of hit those fans that way.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about, you recently announced some exciting news for July. Obviously, the sport's going to look different this year than kind of the traveling tour that it was in year 1 and planned to be this year. Can you tell those who don't know kind of what that setup is like for July's tournament? And then, what are some of the content ideas and the opportunities that it presents?
100%. And so I expect all 50 people on the Zoom call to tune in come July 25th as well. With sort of like coronavirus, we had to adapt our season. And so real simply, we decided to build out a new model. It's a tournament. It's 20 games over 16 days. It's fanless and quarantined. We haven't announced the location yet. Most of the games will be on TV. Instead of having a regular season, how we typically have it, what we're going to do is have like a group play stage, then an elimination round leading into like a Final Four. So it's a little bit more condensed. It'll all live on NBC Sports and NBC Property Mains, and then like our OTT with them, NBC Sports Gold. And so it's a way for us to sort of like have a season and create content around it, while sort of like respecting the health and safety of fans and players alike, right? Especially because we're a tour-based model. If you go home and you get sick and you bring it out to all the players and you get them sick and you go back home, and you can sort of see how it could spiral out into issues. And so we decided to build sort of like a bubble model per se, as what you're seeing the NBA and NHL sort of do. And we were the first to move from a team sports perspective. I think the PBR is the first one to have games, but from a team sport, the amount of players and staff we have, we're the first to announce on that front. And that was pretty critical for us to be out ahead of everyone.
Yeah. And what are some of the ideas, if you could share, or at least some of the kind of preliminary thoughts as to, because it does seem like, obviously it's not as optimal as having a kind of a traveling season and full stadiums, but it does seem like a unique opportunity to get a lot of attention on the sport during a time where, people are craving meaningful games. What are some of the opportunities you guys are looking at and some of the content ideas that you think could come of this that you're particularly excited about?
100%. I mean, this is like I would argue is an opportunity for us more than anything, is that if there's not as much sports going on, it allows us to sort of get new eyeballs, new attention to the game. And now that we have sports betting turned on, people might be sort of betting or doing a free to play onto it. And so for us, it's super important that we get tune in and attention towards it. And so a lot of our content ideas stem into how to develop social experiences around it. How do we sort of work with a college or a club organization to create tune in? Because what we ultimately want is people watching the PLL from July 25th to August 9th. And if we can sort of like be part of the public conscious around it, that's what's so important. And that requires a whole host of content ideas. That's stuff we're doing ourselves. That's partnerships with groups like a Barstool or like a brand partnership. And that's just like a lot of different sort of like advertising sort of avenues. So I think for us, like getting that tune in attention during that 2-week window is of prime importance. It's all we think about. And I think that similar to how we talked about the question earlier around how sports have gotten large, this could be our jumping off point, right? Lacrosse has had steadily growth. You ask any lacrosse player, it's the fastest growing sport in the United States. And it's really based off of data around high school participation. But the actual like hegemonic nature of sports, like being part of sports culture, people watch your game and necessarily play, right? There aren't like youth UFC leagues. People watch the UFC. And so if we want people to watch lacrosse, this is like our prime chance for us to sort of showcase our sport. And I think it's a fun sport to watch, but I'm certainly biased into that though.
Yeah, well, it'll be a good chance. Definitely going to get a lot of new sports fans tuning in. So that's super exciting, I'm sure, for the league as a whole, even though the circumstances kind of are unfortunate to present that opportunity. Um, so you mentioned earlier kind of being timely with content, using The Last Dance to announce kind of your sport betting. Specific to The Last Dance, I know you have a story a bit about when you were in a documentary, and I know a few people in The Last Dance are a little upset about the way they were portrayed. Scottie Pippen, I've heard. Horace Grant isn't too happy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your documentary experience being on the other side of things?
Oh man, yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier, I coached in Uganda. I coached lacrosse. I worked for this organization called Fields of Growth. And basically, throughout college, what I would do is I would help tour Americans, across Uganda, which is like an East African country. It's English speaking, and for like 2 weeks, I would take them on like whitewater rafting trips and service-oriented stuff. And we ran a school, and then on the side, I'd coach lacrosse, where I had like a team in downtown Kampala, which is the capital. And so the team actually ended up qualifying for the World Championships in lacrosse in 2014, which were in Denver. And I spent the 2013 summer training the team and getting them in shape, creating rosters, doing cuts. And it's really tough because these guys aren't professional lacrosse players and they're the sport. They're sort of like not sort of like in training shape to compete. And really what I preached to them as one of the coaches was like, I was the general manager of the team. So I was responsible for the actual roster construction. And man, I was maybe 21 at the time. And most of these guys are like in their mid 20s to mid 30s. Some have been through some like really traumatic experiences. And I'm sort of coaching them. And my whole philosophy was like, we're not going to show up just to play. We're going to show up to win games because it's your coach. And so we had a documentary crew following us. And so fast forward to 2014 at the World Championships, Uganda comes. It's the first ever African team to compete in the World Championships. It's this huge momentous occasion. Everyone's sort of celebrating that they're even there. While we were there, we actually won 2 games, beat Argentina and South Korea. And it sort of like culminates in this like special showing of a documentary called Kandote about the whole journey, how it got there. And like the documentary ends with the first face-off essentially. And so I've been part of this organization for 2-3 years. Like I care so much about it. And so you're kind of like bursting at the seams to watch it. There's like a whole watch party. So it's a sold out crowd and you show up and they're playing the documentary. And in the documentary, it turns out that I am portrayed as the coach that just hounds the shit out of the guys. I'm yelling at them, calling them lazy, I'm calling them out of shape. It's me standing over guys, telling them to get up and do push-ups and to sprint. And you're like, I'm sitting in this locker room because it's juxtaposed of all this yelling with the backstory, the human interest side of, the childhood or lives of these guys who played. And so my best friends, who I'm very close with to this day, but who had really tough lives growing up, whether it was like fighting in the genocide or losing their parents or disease. And, they're sort of coupling that and cutting in with like training stories of me, this American, like yelling at them to work harder. So I was in this Denver theater, this documentary showing, and I was just like head down, totally embarrassed. And I could look back and laugh at the time, even though it was kind of funny. And the players got to laugh at it too, because I was definitely pretty hard charging onto it. But look, we built an entire team in East Africa that came out and competed in the 2014 games. They compete again in 2018. And we started lacrosse in the whole continent of Africa that's now spread to Kenya and other places. And so it's that fun story, but that's my documentary.
That's incredible. That must have been a crazy experience. How did you end up going there and becoming the coach of that team? Was that something you pursued, or did it kind of happen on a whim a little bit?
I definitely pursued it a little bit. Like I sort of went there when I was in high school and had like a really lovely experience and enjoyed it. And then I was studying that in college. And so I was working for a nonprofit and we were sort of running this school where we built an economic model that was, the long story short, we would grow pineapples, we'd sell the pineapples, and that would fund a school for like orphaned children who were too far away from a local school. And it actually worked out really well. We had like all these students coming from America, they're coming to Uganda, they'd sort of tour around, and they would help sort of like fund out these projects that create a sustainable economic model to run the school called the Hopeful School. And so while I was there, I was obsessed with lacrosse. The other guys had done it. And we sort of got like sticks and balls and helmets shipped over. And we just built a program out there. This guy, Kevin Dugan, really led the way of the whole charge. It kind of came down to it when they were building up a team that There wasn't many people who were willing to live in Uganda and not make any money for like 3 months straight. And I was one of them because I was 21 at the time. And so I did it and ended up sort of like becoming sort of a really nice career path and a lot of friends for life for sure.
That's great. Looks like Shannon has a question. Shannon, did you want to unmute yourself and ask that question there?
Sure. Thank you so much. Hi, Tyler. I have a question in regards to sponsorships. I'm actually a graduate student at George Washington, and I've been learning a lot in my sports marketing courses about sponsorships. So I'm just wondering, what do you typically look for when deciding if you're going to partner with a brand or property?
Money. In all seriousness, we have a BD team that sells our sponsorships, and it's not my decision to say whether it's a good or a bad sponsorship. It's they come in, how to authentically integrate them. That's the biggest question. I would say like a really good example actually is if you go to our Instagram feed or look at our YouTube channel for Sun Chlorella, it's the official superfood of the PLL. And so it's this like supplement you put in your shakes that's made out of algae. And you're probably like, what the hell? And it's not big in the United States. It's actually a Japanese company that's really big in Japan, Indonesia, and Thailand. And we had to figure out like, how do we make this sort of like integrate into PLL? It's authentic towards it. And so like, we found a player who was taking the supplement on a regular basis. And then instead of just sort of like putting out a press release or like a lockup logo, we shot like a really cool sort of cinematic style video of them making a shake with it. And it's like, I mean, it's really, really badass, honestly. I hate to hype it up that much, but it's well worth it. And like our thought, Shannon, was like, hey, how do we authentically integrate this product into our league and our content strategy more than like whether it's a good fit or not? Because their social presence is small, they weren't that large, but they're investing in PLL. And if you're investing in us, we want to make sure that you don't just get your value, but you get 2 or 3 times back. And so you continue to support lacrosse and the PLL at large. And so we went all out and sort of like servicing that partner in that way. The same thing goes for like us when we did a cheese ball contest, is that our partners are the ones who are investing in the sport of lacrosse and PLL. We want to make sure they sort of see that value for it. And so our creative team, our job is to find something authentic to our fans. And then that also sort of like helps the partner as well.
Thank you.
Cool, no problem.
And just on top of that, I know a lot of leagues and teams, especially, I worked for a few NFL teams and was part of that league for a bit. There's definitely a struggle between the partnership team and the social teams in that a lot of the partnership teams, historically have sold a lot of historical type of assets like in stadium, and social has basically social and digital has been kind of an add-on. Are you selling social specifically to partners, or is everything part of a larger package?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the beauty of PLL is that you're able to sell in everything all at once. You can sell in our linear assets and our social assets for our league, but then also for our teams and our players, and we're able to activate upon that. We basically built influencer marketing at scale. And so it's really easy for a partner to come in and be able to tap in across a whole swath of our sort of interests. A good example in the senior day is Chipotle. We built this campaign. They came in and sort of supported in a really strong way. We were able to activate all these different things. So I think like I came from a place where there was sort of butting ahead at times between BD and creative and sales. And how we sort of solve that is we create concepts and we bring them to the BD team to sort of sell like how we'd execute them. And then B, you kind of have to recognize that if someone's going to put money into our business as a startup, it's not just like, hey, I did that. It's like it's being creative and trying to make sure that it succeeds so they can eventually get more dollars down the road too. And so I don't think that we have that same struggle that other leagues or teams might do, partly because we really care about people who are investing in our league because we didn't have that a year or two ago. And so we go above and beyond and sort of service our brand partners.
Yeah. We'll take one more question. I know we're kind of coming up on time here. Aaron, did you want to introduce yourself and ask that question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my name is Aaron Riccio. I work with an investment bank based in New York City, particularly focused on sports technology. And, I saw your Genius sports partnership the other week and was just wondering how you kind of feel that affects your brand, affects a league, and kind of affects your overall fan engagement strategy.
I mean, it's a great question. I think it leads into sports betting, right? When we talk about how to get net new fans to sport of lacrosse, they can watch all the highlights they want. But if people are betting on the games, it's a whole different level it allows us to sort of take advantage of. And it doesn't exist in lacrosse currently. You can't bet on either of the other two professional lacrosse leagues. You can't really bet on college lacrosse, no one's setting lines. And so this gives us an opportunity, especially in a period of like kind of dead, quiet time for sports, for us to succeed here. And so for us, the partnership with Genius Sports they're like our official data and integrity partner, I believe, allows people to sort of like go out to sports books to set lines for our games. Everything that will lead to a whole new level of fan engagement and new fan interest in the league too. I think like the simplest analogy is like I'm from Baltimore. I went to the Preakness as a kid. I don't know anything about horses or horse racing, but I'll bet on the Preakness or Kentucky Derby. And that's kind of our hope with lacrosse, is that it leads to a net new fan to the game. They come in through betting and they stick around because they love watching it.
No, that's great. Thank you. Kudos before I head out to your nimbleness and being able to
Appreciate
kind
it.
of adjust so quickly.
Appreciate that.
Cool. I know we went 3 minutes over. I'm sure we can keep talking for many more hours about all the things you guys are doing, but we'll just have to tune in July to see it all unfold.
Yeah, I'll send a calendar invite to everyone on this call here for July 25th to tune in to NBC Sports. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Thanks for the time, and thanks everyone for joining. We'll be posting more about next guests, and then we'll take this and put it as a VOD on our blog. So